Hello and welcome to Bud's RPG Review, where I give my thoughts on role-playing games, card games and board games. Today's review is the Numenera starter set by Monte Games. Okay, first a bit of history. Numenera was the brainchild of industry legend Monte Cook and was originally funded in 2013 via Kickstarter. It broke the record for the most money for a tabletop role-playing game by raising over $500,000 in backers. This huge amount of funding allowed the designers to not only fund the core rulebook, but also a full line of products. This box set was released in December 2016 as a starting point for new players and has an introductory adventure that will accommodate 3 to 6 players. Okay, to the box. The cover has the exact same art as the core rulebook, which is excellent and really gives the setting some intrigue. The set itself contains a D6 and a D20, Book 1, Book 2, character sheets, a map for the adventure in Book 2, XP cards and GM intrusion cards, a before you start card, and finally a cheat sheet. The before you start card tells you what to read and in what order. Okay, so first up is the book it tells you to read first, Book 1. The first chapter of this book is entitled An Introduction to the Ninth World. This outlines the basic concept of the world. The name Numenera comes from the Latin numen, which means spirit or magical essence, and era, which means time or age. In the context of the game, they mean it as the ninth world or age. The reason it is the ninth world is because there have been 8 previous eras before that have risen and fallen to dust. Numenera is set 1 billion years in the future of Earth. The core idea of the game is exploration and discovery, with the emphasis placed on unearthing and decoding the wonders of the previous 8 epochs. These wonders themselves, be it the invisible nano-spirits hovering in the air in clouds called the Iron Wind, or remnants of visitors from other dimensions, are called by the people of the Ninth World the Numenera. The Ninth World itself is a vast single continent which has a collection of settled lands called the Steadfast. Each of these lands in the Steadfast has a ruler, but are guided by a leader called the Amber Pope. The Amber Pope leads the Order of Truth. The Order of Truth reveres the knowledge and people of the past at an almost religious level. It is essentially a quasi-religion dedicated to the worship of science. Outside the Steadfast is the Beyond, which contains scattered, isolated communities. The people of the Ninth World is up next. This details how the people exist day by day surrounded by the Numenera. They incorporate ancient devices and structures into their everyday life, even though their understanding of them is usually incomplete. On a very basic level, 3 types of explorers exist. Glaives, who are the warriors, science-wielding nanos, and roguish jacks. It describes most people as human, but there are also abhumans, which could be anything from mutants to genetically engineered creatures, and visitants, who are people not native to Earth. Following this is the Numenera. They come in 3 flavours: artefacts, ciphers, and oddities. Artefacts are devices that have more than one use, such as a belt that creates an invisible force field, or a gun that shoots lightning. Ciphers are small, minor things that have a one-shot effect. They can be ingested, injected, thrown, etc. These are plentiful throughout the Ninth World, and players are encouraged to use them when needed, as they'll always find more. Oddities are relics that produce an effect that is just curious and nothing else. This could be anything from a large chunk of glass that appears to have glowing lights bouncing around inside it, or maybe a picture frame that shows peculiar images randomly. They're often misunderstood by design. The next part is called Looking at the Ninth World in the 21st Century. Although Numenera is a science fantasy setting set 1 billion years in the future, it plays almost like a medieval fantasy setting. It describes characters as being able to have and use things like zippers and ink pens from previous eras. They can also understand things like how diseases are transmitted, but it's more around how the terminology has changed. Guns aren't called guns by people in Numenera, simply because technology has transcended that word. Words are more grouped. Although the likes of plastic and carbon fibre exist, they would simply call it synth. Okay, all good so far. The next chapter is called Understanding Your Character. Each character has a descriptor, a type, and a focus. This is defined as I am an adjective, noun, who verb. Sounds odd, but bear with me. For example, I am Karis, a swift glaive who wields 2 weapons, or Sharad Talar is an intelligent nano who leads. The game of Numenera uses the cipher system. It has 3 defining stats: might, speed, and intellect. Might defines how strong and durable your character is. Speed describes how fast you are and your reflexes. And intellect determines how smart and likeable you are. Each of these stats have 2 further components: pool and edge. Pool is the basic measurement of the stat, The bigger the pool, the better you are with the stat. Pools are the stats that are depleted through injury and sickness. You can also spend points from your pools to decrease the difficulty of a task. Edge essentially defines your expertise and skills associated with your pools for the purpose of spending them to complete tasks, and your edge reduces the spending costs from your pools. Finally, we have effort. Effort is the ability to really make an attempt at something count. In game terms, when you apply effort to completing a task, you take 3 points from your relevant pool, but decrease the difficulty of the task by 1 step. More on task difficulty coming up. Applying effort is entirely your choice. As in life, it's not required. Furthermore, you subtract your edge from your effort. Simply put, people who put effort in, who are trained or specialised in a skill, find it easier than those who aren't. You can also apply effort to damage, which makes you inflict 3 more points. Characters may also have special abilities that cost points from their stat pools. Edge also reduces the cost of the use of these abilities. Next up is ciphers and oddities. Ciphers are single-use items that produce a short-term useful effect. There are 2 types, anoetic and occultic. Anoetic ciphers are simple to use, like a pill to swallow or a small flip switch. Occultic ciphers are slightly more complex but produce more interesting effects, but they count as 2 for determining the amount you can carry. We also discover that in the 9th world, the most common way of getting what you want is to barter for it. There is, however, a type of currency called shins. These are normally valuable looking buttons, cogs and diodes. A shin is enough to buy a drink, a meal or even a bed for the night. The next chapter is called How to Play Numenera. This chapter gives a basic breakdown on the steps that are followed by the GM. The first step of a round is the player telling the GM what they want to do. This is a character action. On step 2, the GM determines if the action is routine, therefore not needing a roll, or if the characters can fail. If there is a chance of failing, the GM determines which stat it is rolled on and the difficulty of the task. This is rated from 1 being routine to 10 being impossible. This number is then modified by special abilities, equipment and training. If these things reduce it to 1 or less, it becomes routine and a roll is not required. If it still requires a roll, then the difficulty number is multiplied by 3 to arrive at the target number. This needs to be equalled or beaten on a d20. So an impossible task with nothing helping it would be a 30 to beat on a d20, hence making it, well, impossible. And that is the basic mechanic of Numenera. We are then presented with a section on task difficulty and the task difficulty table, as well as information on modifying difficulty. Combat is next up. One important thing to note here is that players make all the die rolls. They roll to attack and they roll to defend. Armour is a simple affair. You reduce your armour number from any damage you receive. Physical weapons come in 3 flavours, light, medium and heavy, and they do 2, 4 and 6 points of damage respectively. Damage is taken as reduction to stat pools, with might being the default if not otherwise specified. There are 3 levels of damage. Hail, which is your normal state if your pools are 1 or higher. Impaired, which is when one of your stat pools is reduced to 0. This makes effort more difficult. And debilitated, which reduces characters to a crawling mess. The only thing that follows debilitated is dead. Damage recovery can be done 4 times a day at a cost in time from 1 action to 10 minutes to 1 hour to 10 hours. On a natural roll of a 19, you deal an additional 3 points of damage in combat, and the roll has a minor effect pertinent to the roll you're making. For example, a smooth landing when jumping from a ledge or knocking a foe back in combat. On a roll of a natural 20, you deal an additional 4 points of damage and produce a major effect, like climbing a wall twice as fast or knocking a foe over. On a natural 17 or 18, you deal an extra 1 or 2 points of damage respectively, and a roll of 1 is always bad. It causes a GM intrusion. GM intrusions happen to reflect the complication in events. GMs can introduce intrusions at any point, and they provide the players with an immediate problem that needs solving. Whenever the GM introduces an intrusion, the player affected is given 2 experience points, for which they must give 1 experience point to another player and justify it. These are represented with the cards that are contained within the set. A player can spend 1 XP that they already have to avoid GM intrusion. I feel that this is an interesting mechanic that adds an extra dimension to proceedings. We then have basic information on range and speed and a section on encounters, rounds and initiative. A round is defined as being between 5 to 10 seconds, with about 10 rounds to a minute. It's quite freeform. To determine who goes first, an initiative roll is made based on speed. It then goes on to discuss basic interaction, where rolls are not often required. They then go on to push the basic tenet of Numenera, which is exploration and discovery. Finally, they finish off with XP, which is a reiteration of the previous rules with a few additional factors. Last of all, we have a glossary of the most important terms. Okay, on to book 2. The second book begins with a small section on mastering the game. It gives a few words of advice on how to run Numenera, and it is then followed with the adventure that is included with the set, Vortex. There'll be spoilers from this point on, so stop reading now if you want to play this. The adventure follows the players as they find a strange structure in the wilderness, with a group of cultists attempting to perform a ritual outside of it. Once the ritual is completed, a door in the structure opens, and the cultists disappear inside. Soon after, the structure vanishes, but the cultists have left information on the structure outside, including when and where it will next appear. If the players follow the information that was left, they find out where and when it will reappear. When it happens, a single cultist exits. She lets the players know that the inside of the structure, which is called the narthex, is something called the Temple of the Vortex, and she begs them to enter and rescue her brother. The players can then enter the structure and explore the vast interior. Inside, they do battle with the cultists and their evil leader, also finding out that the structure contains a powerful energy vortex, which the cultists worship as a god. We see the members of the cult detailed in full, and we have basic event type maps that are also contained within the box set as floor plans. We also get the instructions on what to do if the players go off the beaten path, as well as the treasure they find, and we have details on the vortex and its automaton guardian, the Angel of Steel. We have details on the local village, Jut, and the places of interest that surround it, as well as information on what order events should occur in. Following this, we have an interesting chapter called Ciphers. This gives some nice basic information and game effects for some ciphers you can drop into your campaign. The final chapter is called Being a Game Master. This gives you good advice for budding GMs on how they should approach running Numenera. It pushes the concept that the story should always take precedence over the rules, and that the rules are there to carry the story, not define it. It follows with some info on setting difficulty ratings, GM intrusions, and how and when to use them to guide the narrative, and also how logic is applied to the game. We then have information on NPCs and how to stat them out and run them. Finally, we have a few creatures to challenge the players with. Firstly, we have the Marga, that are a form of abhumans that look and feel like the Brew from RuneQuest. We then have Messameme, which is a hideous crustacean that lurks in shallow water that mimics groups of individual creatures to lure people near. Next is the Ravage Bear, which is a hulking, tusked mammalian predator that hunts by sense of smell entirely. And the Sarak, which is a strange creature that is likely from elsewhere, that has a large, leathery cat-like body and a swirling ball of energy in place of its head. The Sarak is actually a biomechanical creature that is incredibly smart and can control electronic devices. It is at this point on the back page where we discover that the players can download Vortex Part 2 with a QR code from the Monte Games website. Finally, we have floor plans for the Vortex adventures and a good mix of pre-generated characters. For me, this set has good and bad points. Numenera is such a simple system that I had to reread it a few times to make sure I wasn't missing something important. It seems to be slick and intuitive, which is definitely a good thing. The books are presented in luscious full colour and the art throughout is fabulous. There are a few things I didn't like though. Firstly, the set is fairly lightweight for the money you're paying. You get two 32-page books, 2 dice, some pre-gen characters and floor plans for the adventure within, a cheat sheet and a before you start card, as well as some XP and GM intrusion cards. And the rest of the box set is filled with a giant cardboard insert to pad it out. It could probably have fit inside the box half the size with room to spare. Also, whoever designed the box probably didn't take into account that the cheat sheet should have been stiff cardboard instead of the contents page. Also, the dice. Not only do they feel a bit cheap, but why was the D20 not the Numenera branded ones from the Monte website? It's surely a missed opportunity. I also had a problem with the layout of the second book. Why put the How to be a good GM section after the adventure? Also, why is there only one cheat sheet for the players and the GM to share? Surely it would have been a relatively small cost to include 6 in the set. It's puzzling to say the least. One large thing that was missed out of book 1 was an example of play also. I for one would have liked to have seen some action to get my head around the system. All this being said though, I still enjoyed it. Numenera already has a cult following and its emphasis on exploration and discovery is incredibly endearing. This is a game I would love to play. In conclusion, this set is not a must-have for those who already own the Numenera core rulebook, as it offers nothing new. If, however, you intend on picking up this game for the first time, then you could do a lot worse. Numenera has charm by the bucket load, and I have no doubt that players new to the game would thoroughly enjoy what it has to offer. The rules are simple and slick, and look like they would become incredibly intuitive after a few sessions. For me, the game and setting are great, but the starter set has some poor design faults and missed opportunities. I give the Numenera starter set 7 out of 10. If you enjoyed this review, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also, don't forget to check out my other reviews. Bud out.